What's good, Illini Nation? It's your man in the middle, Deon Thomas, back for our second with my man Dane, as we do a recap of last week's Illinois basketball games and this upcoming second go-around against the Badgers, this time at the Kohl Center. But, before we start off, I want to thank my sponsors and my friends over at BETRIVERS Sportsbook for being a part of what I am trying to do here, which is bring a ton of content and enjoyment to Illini Nation. And then, of course, got to thank my boys over at the Field of 68 for carrying the podcast. But with all that in mind, let's get started. Illini Nation, my man Dane is with me again. He is going to be the interviewer today, and I am going to be the interviewee as we break down Illini basketball. Dane, what's going on, baby?
How you doing? And of course, obviously Illinois breaking off a few wins since we last had our first weekly recap. I know 3-game win streak, 4 out of their last 5 since we last talked. But of course that hiccup in the road, and that was last week. And we're going to talk about those 2 games before we preview the Wisconsin game, and Indiana obviously before Ohio State. And quite frankly, all I have to say is 3 words: Trace Jackson Davis in that game.
Well, I can tell you right now, those 3 words even give me a little bit of a shudder, because the big fella went to work.
He did. And I'll ask you, I mean, obviously it wasn't Illinois' best performance, and both teams are at 5-4 now in the Big Ten, but does it give you some, obviously TJD's an All-American, but does it give you some concern that Illinois is going to have difficulty stopping the likes of a Zach Edey or a Hunter Dickinson, who they haven't seen yet? Because that was the first legit big guy that I feel like Coleman or Dane just saw inside, and they didn't know how to handle him.
Well, I'm going to answer that by saying no, and we'll get into the why. I'll touch on it in a little bit. When you have players that are as good as TJD, you have to make adjustments, and there were some things that they did not work on, and I'm sure Coach did not feel comfortable double teaming and things like that, because they had not worked on the rotations out of those double teams. And so he went to work, but what I would have liked to have seen was the guys to understand that Trace only goes left. He ain't going right. His right hand is allergic. It's anemic. I mean, the 2 shots he took with his right hand, I don't know, one of them looked like it was kind of deflected by Dane, but the other one went almost clear over the basket. That's something that the guys on the court has to pick up, But what I saw in the next game, and we'll get more in depth into it with Ohio State, is they worked on the double team against a really good Zeb Key in the post, and some other guys that were able to post, Sensenbaugh, the big freshman, also does some of his damage posting up. And you saw where Illinois made some adjustments off of what happened in the Indiana game, and they doubled in the post in that Ohio State game to practice some of those things, as well as scrambling out of those posts into the right position. So to answer that question, no, I don't have pause. First of all, no one is going to stop Zach Edey. Almost no one is going to stop Trace Jackson Davis, and Hunter, it depends on how he feels that day as to how dominant he's going to be. So no, I don't have any pause to it. I think that was the first time Dane had really had, he's a lot better defender than he showed. He's a lot smarter, a heady player than he showed in that game. I think Trace kind of caught everybody, and I don't know how he could catch you off guard, but I think he caught everybody off guard with his post play and really his toughness.
Mm-hmm. And I agree to a certain extent. I'm really interested to see, because you could argue that Illinois' back half of the Big Ten schedule is harder than their first half, and they struggled a little bit in the first half because even though they don't have to go to the rack, they have home Rutgers, they have Michigan, they got to go to Ohio State. We're going to talk about Wisconsin this weekend, of course, Purdue to end the regular season. So it's not going to be easy. And you can almost say the Big Ten's cannibalizing itself out of it's not going to be a 9-10 bid league. It might just be 7 or 8 now, potentially even 6. Likely, I would say 7 or higher, but just beat each other up, which we've seen throughout the season. Now, something I'm going to do right now for you. I'm going to read Illinois player's stat line through the last 5 games. You got to tell me who he is, because this is something I noticed. I think you'll be able to get it right. This is something I noticed, at least in the Indiana game versus some of the other games they won. All right. Versus Nebraska, 10 points, 4 boards. Versus Michigan State, 19 points, 3 boards on 58% shooting. At Minnesota, 19 points, 10 rebounds and a double-double. Versus Indiana, 0 points. And versus Ohio State in a 69-60 win, 12 points, 8 rebounds.
I know exactly who you're talking about. In the Indiana game, that's a bit of an anomaly. Meyer was ill, and he probably should not have played, but he wanted to go out there. And you could see he didn't have it. There was no extra burst. There was no, he wasn't himself, and it's just plain as day that he wasn't himself. And I think that was a big thing. Oh no, I know that was a big reason Illinois struggled offensively, because he's that X factor, that guy. He's that other guy. You got your Michael Jordan, you got your Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen wasn't feeling very well that night, and of course that gave way to other guys not doing their jobs as well. But, he's a big part. And to get that 12 points, coming, again, still not at 100%. They played pretty well. And that was a really good that win against Ohio State was a really good team win.
Mm-hmm. I would say the same. And you could have kind of seen that game that Meyer wasn't himself. But you're right. Would you say he's the number one? I don't want to say X factor, because you called him a Scottie Pippen-esque. But who do you think is the X factor that, all right, if Illinois is going to make a run, whether it's in the Big Ten tournament or make it to the second weekend, which they haven't done in some time, who's going to be that guy that needs to up his input? Whether is it Meyer? Is it Coleman Hawkins? Is it Jaden Epps? Is it Sincere Harris putting some points on the offensive end? Who do you think that guy is?
Well, Terrence Shannon is going to be Terrence Shannon. You can almost count on what he's going to do a night. Matt Meyer, you can almost count on what he's going to do a night. Coleman Hawkins is one of the most talented players in the country. He has to become more aggressive offensively. And I don't mean just aggressively shooting from the outside, taking hard drives to the basket, getting fouled, getting on the free throw line, to go along with all of the other stuff he does with rebounding, on defense, with block shots. He does all of that stuff beautifully. But I really would like to see him take a step up in aggression on the offensive end. And like I said, I don't just mean shooting, because there's a lot of times that he has, he gets switched off on bigs. Don't take a jump shot. You got a big, drive him, pick up fouls on him. I mean, he had Zeb Key at one point, switching his feet and dancing while he was out there. And instead of driving on Zeb Key and making Zeb foul him or getting to the basket, he settled for a jump shot. I want to see him get more aggressive going to the basket so he can shoot more free throws, as well as put fouls on the other team's main players.
Sorry, I was just muted just there. Coleman's that type of guy where we saw him get hot at home against Wisconsin. Well, yes. You mentioned that other element of the game. Well, where is that coming from? Like, what if there's a night where he doesn't shoot very well? Hence where I'm going to move to the Ohio State game. He only shot 1 for 6 from 3, but he still put up 11 points in 37 minutes. Is that the type of stat line you want to see from Coleman? Is it just an 11-point performance? Obviously, it depends on what TJ does, what Meyer does, but is it going to take a 15, 16-point game in the postseason from Coleman to say, all right, Illinois is a real contender?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I would like that. Don't get me wrong. I would love to see him up around 15 points a game. But I believe with Jaden Epps, the way he's playing, Jaden has averaged double figures the last 6 games, and he's going to consistently be in that 6-gamer. Had, so many assists, I think he's only had 2 or 3 turnovers, like his last 6 games. So he's going to make other players better. Dane Danger can also be one of those players that can really get going for you. So Illinois has 3 main players, and then they have 2, I'll call them B+ players that can really get after you and change some things on the floor. And then, like I said, you bring in Sincere Harris. Sincere's not going to score a lot of points for you. Ty Harris, he may not score a lot of points for you, but what they're going to do for you from an energy standpoint on the glass and from a rebounding standpoint will definitely give you some of those other intangibles that you need, whether they're points, rebounds, offensive rebounds. They'll be able to put some of those things in place that'll really make them a contender. It's their depth. It's not just their main players that are on the court right now.
And that depth, that's something you see. I want to bring up even Alabama. They're one of the best teams in the country because they have long, athletic bodies and they have arguably the best depth in the country. And that's why they're a really good team. But they struggled to shoot the 3 a little bit. And Illinois only shot, I believe it was 18% from 3 against Ohio State. But you notice, what are they going to win with? It's attacking the rim and their defense. And that's where their defense was at their best. And you mentioned a great team win. What was the best thing that you liked in that win over Ohio State this week?
One of the best things that I really liked about that Ohio State win, one, we talked about the adjustments that were made from the loss to Indiana. When you saw them come back out, they really changed things and got better on the defensive end while also closing back out, because this Ohio State team is a really good 3-point shooting team, really limiting them to the 3-point shot as well. So helping in and being able to close back out on their defenders. I love the way they played in transition. I mean, as I was sitting there, and I take notes throughout the game, and I'm always giving myself buzzwords. And if I go back and look at the papers, just about every buzzword on there was the pace that they played, because they played with speed, they played with aggression, and they controlled the pace. And then if you look at the rebounding total of that game, they absolutely crushed Ohio State on the glass. And if you can do that, if they can do that, I mean, it was a 44-30. I mean, a plus 14 rebounding advantage in the game. And that's because you had, as I mentioned, those guys coming off the bench. Terrence Shannon had 7. Matt Meyer had 8. Coleman had 9. Ty Rogers had 8. And then Dane Danger normally is up in there. He only had 4 this game because he had some early foul trouble and really wasn't able to stay on the court very long in that game. But he's a 7-8 rebound guy. I mean, those are things that travel, playing hard, defense, rebounding. Anytime you can do those things and you're on the positive, you're running a very good chance of winning that game.
And you feel like Illinois, we all know that they have the talent to finish as a top 4 team in the Big Ten, and that remains to be seen. And it's almost like if they end up as a 6 or a 7, you're going to be like, "Ooh, I don't want to see that Illinois." They're the team that you could argue has the most potential, right? They sky high, which was what people saw with the roster, even though there's a lot of new faces coming into the season. But you mentioned what they did against Ohio State, Deon, controlling the pace, right? They got out and ran. Well, Saturday, I'm not sure how much they're going to be able to get out and run and controlling the pace because, the Badgers, man, they like to take it at their own pace. They like to go a little bit slower, right? They know they don't have the same athletes as the Fighting Illini, and that hurt them. Obviously, when they went to the State Farm Center, no Tyler Wall, but I feel like Illinois would have won that game anyway. How are you feeling going into this one? Because Wisconsin's going to want it. I believe they've won 4 out of their, 5 out of their last 6, I believe. Illinois has won, but Wisconsin, they're playing better as of late. How do you like this matchup for the Illini going into the Kohl Center? Because I feel like it might be a little bit tighter than the first matchup.
Well, I always expect every Illinois-Wisconsin game to be tight. I expect every Big Ten game to be tight. Anytime there's a blowout, the way they lost to Indiana, for example, is a surprise because you're normally so well prepared and the other team so much or so well that that normally does not happen. I think this game will be not much of the same. It'll be close. But I do believe that Wisconsin has problems matching up with Illinois. Their length at all positions. You know, the shortest person on the team is Jay Neps, but he's almost the same size as Chucky Hepburn. But Chucky's a lot thicker, you know, and older. But at every other position on the floor, I think Illinois matches up, if not has an advantage on the court. They will play fast. They have to play fast. And I don't mean getting out and trying to pressure Wisconsin into something that they don't do, because you're not going to speed them up in that manner. I mean, even the game in Champaign, they only had 9 turnovers. So you're not going to turn them over. But once you get the offensive rebound, that ball has to be in, up, and guys running the floor, because that's not where Wisconsin is their best. They're, you know, again, they don't have a ton of athletes that are going to be able to sprint up and down the court with you. So it's going to be good. Those guys are going to have to continue to do that, penetrate, go hard to the basket. Wisconsin also does not have a ton of shot blockers. So you should be able to attack the basket and attack it often and not settle for 3-point shots. I mean, in the last game in Champaign, they only shot 19, they made 10. And that's kind of where they need to be. And if you can make 10 of them, and again, that was off a lot of really good ball movement and passes to guys that can actually shoot the ball. And like you said, Coleman had an explosion that night and was really able to knock down some threes. And I think that's where Illinois is going to have to be smart. They're going to have to not turn the basketball over, because again, this is a team, if you're giving up possessions by turning it over or taking bad shots, you'll be in a world of trouble up there in Madison.
I said Wisconsin was playing better of late. Obviously, bad statement by me. They've lost 5 out of their last 6. Right, Illinois is the team they've won 5 out of their last 6. Right, Wisconsin's 4-5 in the Big Ten. Illinois 5-4. What worries me, and you mentioned all those matchup type things. Obviously, if Illinois comes out, plays hard, gets to control the pace a little bit, you think they win, not necessarily easily, but pull away in the second half a little bit and just outmatch the Badgers, which very well could be the case. But considering Wisconsin's lost 5 out of their last 6, they're back at home. It feels like a get right game almost for the Badgers, which worries you a little bit because it's a rivalry type game. It has the feeling of a trap game for Illinois, and we haven't seen that consistent effort every single time. I don't want to go all the way back to the Northwestern game because we haven't seen a game like that. Do you think it's possible that the Badgers potentially come out hot and really push off Illinois in the first half, and Illinois is going to have to be playing from behind in this game?
No, I don't see that, because, you know, they're a team that could score the basketball, but the way they scored, I mean, they're still in the 60s. You know, they're average around 65 points a game. That's not a lot of points, you know, and the way they've been playing as of late, even coming off of that loss at Maryland, they're not putting up a lot of points. So they're a team that's going to play low possession. So as long as they're playing low possession games, there's not going to be this big explosion of points. And then until they can get, oh my God, I'm drawing a brain fart on his name. Their best player, whatever that boy name is. Until they get him back on the court, it's
for
going
Wisconsin.
To continue
For Wisconsin,
for Wisconsin, yeah, for Wisconsin.
Tyler Wall?
Tyler. Oh no, he is back. That's right.
Yeah, he is back. That's why I was a little bit confused there.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. Until they can get him back, because even when you come back, until they get him to be 100% is what I meant to say. You sit out some games, it takes a time to get yourself clicking. Also, he can score, he can do his thing, but does that take away from the other guys? Because this is still, again, a team that is not going to have this big offensive explosion where they're going to put up a bunch of points. So Illinois is going to have to do a better job of not beating themselves, not turning the basketball over, not getting to the free throw line and missing free throws. You have to remember to keep the pressure on Wisconsin, driving the ball to the basket, not settling for 3-point shots. If they can do that, they can pull away in this game, because there's just not enough scorers on that other sideline to really, really hurt them unless they beat themselves as well.
And you look at it, you look at the next few matchups: Wisconsin, Nebraska, at Iowa, Minnesota, Rutgers. They're all winnable games. I think the only one who, other than Purdue, who is the other team or a couple teams in the Big Ten that scare you and you're like, oh boy, they're going to give Illinois either a run from their money or give them a loss?
Well, I look at it from matchup situations, okay? Not just, this team is doing better than this team or not. Rutgers is going to be a matchup problem for Illinois. I mean, the way they play, their toughness, their ruggedness, they crash, rebound the boards. They got guys that can put back, get it out in transition. You would think that's the kind of team that would fit well what Illinois does, but that's actually, Steve Pikiell's a hell of a coach. And that bulldogged mentality can be an issue for Illinois. So that could be a tough game. We saw the way Penn State shot the basketball. They shoot a lot of threes. If they're clicking on that night and Illinois is not doing as well as they can to defend the three-point line, especially playing over in University Park, that could be a problem because now you're on the road. That's why that win against them was so important in Champaign. Anyone that's ever traveled to Happy Valley understands that's a terrible travel. I normally give that game to Doug Altenberger because I hate that travel. Even when they came into the league my senior year. And so I only got to travel out there one time. And I hated the one time I had to travel out there. There's no good way of getting into that place. So when that happens, now you got all of this, you might not get sleep on time. You got this, you got that. So there's other factors outside of it that really can cause an issue for you. And let's just be quite honest. Now you're going on the road to play in Indiana. You've given Indiana the confidence. Then they have Race Thompson back. I believe Franklin will be back soon. Now you're facing a full-fledged Indiana team. So that's another area where it could be really difficult. But again, all of those games are winnable. We are going to have to play to the level. We as Illinois are going to have to play to the level that they can play at. And like you said, this is probably the most talented team in the Big Ten. They got to play like it every single night.
And thankfully, they can get away with some losses. Obviously, of course, giant wins against UCLA and, of course, against Texas in the non-conference. Well, 5-4, 11 games left in the Big Ten before the Big Ten tournament. Realistically, 5-4 is the number 7 or 8. That's where I'm kind of thinking 7 or 8 more wins in conference that they'll be able to get to and get around a little past that 20 win mark, around 9 or 10 losses. I think with those non-conference wins, that sits them around the 5 to sort of 8 line, depending on who they win and lose to. Do you think that's realistic right now?
Oh, it's definitely realistic. But I will say this. I think we could get up to 9 wins, maybe even 10 out of this next 11. Purdue's going to be tough just because they're big. If we come out and play the way we're supposed to against Michigan, we could get that win. The matchups I believe, suit us against Ohio State, because when you can take a bigger Coleman Hawkins and put him on the freshman from Ohio State, I think that caused him problems here. And if Sensabaughn's not putting up the baskets the way he normally does, that team is not as good. I think Northwestern played out of their butts and Illinois played terrible up in Evanston. So I do not see that going awry again. Indiana, again, in Bloomington is going to be tough. They should win this Penn State game. Penn State has struggled ever since they, burst out the gates against Illinois. They've struggled. Rutgers could be tough. So that's why I mentioned those 2 games, that Rutgers game and that Purdue game. Everybody else is very winnable if Illinois plays to their level. So 8, 9 games, I think you're right in that same ballpark.
Mm-hmm. But I'm going to say Illinois, even though the Big Ten has not done well in the NCAA tournament the past few years, they're the type of team that you see as like on the 7 line or the 6 line they're the type of trendy pick that people pick to get out of their region to get to the Final Four. And obviously, I'd assume you'd agree, those aspirations are absolutely still there for this team. Like everyone was saying, I remember, I don't know if it was a post on the Field of 68 now or earlier when they went on that losing streak, right? They lost to Northwestern, they lost to Penn State. It was after the hangover against Texas. We're like, oh my God, Illinois is not going to right the ship. That was in December, right? Like that wasn't even before the new year. That wasn't even before they got into the heat of conference play. And they expected a coach like Brad Underwood to not be able to turn his team around. Look what he did at Stephen F. Austin. Look what he did in 1 year at Oklahoma State, right? And all of a sudden, now they're 5-4. They're talking about being a dark horse in the Big Ten, getting up to that 5 or 4 line potentially in the NCAA tournament if they win those 9 or 10 games. So overreacting is such a thing in college basketball. I think a ton of people overreacted early on with this Illinois team.
Oh, no, definitely. They definitely did. I mean, as I told, well, first of all, historically, take a look at Brad Underwood teams. Beginning of the year, they're okay. Middle of the year, they're a little bit better. You know, the next third of the year, they're normally better. And then closing out the season, they're really good. Since he's been at Illinois, that's been the trend. Of course, Stephen F. Austin was a little different, but he did the exact same thing at Oklahoma State. Those teams get better because he makes adjustments throughout the season that helps his teams get better. Did the same thing. I mean, just think about it. Jay Epps has started one game before he started the last game. Jay Epps is now going to be in the lineup. They were first running a 5-out offense and had Dane Danger coming off the bench. Now Dane's in that starting lineup. I mean, so he's constantly making adjustments. I mean, their offense was different. Their defense was different. And now he's, kind of tweaked things and put it the way he wants. And I believe has things set to where he wants them to be. Guys are buying into their roles. I mean, they play, as you mentioned the game when they went on the run. To be honest, I think they got punched in the mouth, not to mention 19 days straight practice, videos, and no rest, no anything, 19 straight days before the Indiana game. I think they were a little tired. I don't like to make excuses. Excuses like assholes. Everybody got one and they all stink, my mama used to say. And I think that's kind of where they were. They were exhausted. So they got their butts kicked by Indiana, came right back out against a really good Ohio State team and played a good Ohio State team and played better. You can also see some of those adjustments that they made. So they're still, again, learning different situations to be able to use in games if they're up against it against a post player. So it's a constant growth and metamorphosis with this Illinois team, as all Brad Underwood teams have gone through, and then they're normally better in the end. You said one thing earlier, and I have to agree with you. I think this team is built to win in March. Were they built last year, even with Kofi as dominant as he was? No, because you could slow down, or allow Kofi to do what he was doing and then kind of shut down everyone else, or vice versa. Let guys take jump shots and you can test them, but then, try to slow down Kofi with double teams. Now this team has Matt Meyer, TJ, Coleman Hawkins, Epps, Dane Danger. You got 5 legit players that can give you 10 points or above. I mean, that's what you need to win at the next level. The guard play even though we lost Sky, has not dropped off. It's still good because, Scott, what you have seen Jaden Epps continue to grow as a point guard. When he put Sincere Harris in there, Sincere was really good at that point guard position, especially putting pressure. Ty Rogers has even played point guard at times for Illinois. And if you go back to last year, Coleman Hawkins played 3 games as your starting point guard at 6'10", 6'11". I mean, so guard play is so important in the tournament, not just the Big Ten tournament, but the NCAA tournament. And I think Illinois has legit options at that point guard position to help them through. And then on the interior, and just so many different things that they can do offensively as well as defensively, that gives them options to be able to compete against anyone.
Yeah, no, they're one of the more scary teams that you don't want to see pop up in your bracket. And they've kind of played themselves out of like a top 3 line, unless for some reason they run the table toward the end of the year, which is obviously unlikely. And I'm excited to watch that Wisconsin game. Prediction. I know obviously you thought they were going to knock off Wisconsin. You said that a little bit earlier, but you could go with a little bit of a score here. How much does Illinois beat Wisconsin by? Because I know you're going with the Illini.
It's going to be a tough game, but I would say a 6 or 7 point game up there. I mean, it's been, and that's a lot. I mean, if we go back all the way back to when Io was here, we won on a last second shot, and then the next year, pretty much the same thing. So it's always tight games when you're playing in the Kohl Center, but I can see, especially if Illinois plays the way they did the last game and the way they did prior to the Indiana debacle, I think they can pull that out by 6 or 7 points.
I'm going to go with the Illini. I think it's going to be a very tight first half, and I'm going to go a little bit closer. They might make me look dumb with this. Who knows? They might blow them out if Wisconsin continues to struggle. I'm going to say a few buckets down the stretch. TJ comes up big in the last couple of minutes, and their defense locks down. They're able to hit some free throws, which they were, I believe, 16 of 18 against Ohio State. And Deon, before we go, I'm going to do a little bit of trivia segment about you at Illinois when you in your 3 games. And now these questions are about 1 and 2 in your 3 games in the NCAA tournament, if I'm correct, at Illinois. You played Vanderbilt, Long Beach State, and Georgetown. And I'm going to say your stat lines for those games, and you have to tell me which game that was. All right. So
this is so not fair. And it's not fair, and I'm going to be honest with you. No, we're going to do it. I'm all in, 100%. I never knew how many points I had at the end of a game because it didn't matter to me. All I cared about is if we won or if we lost. That's what I care about. But that's okay, Dane. Let's go.
All right. So we'll start with this game. Let's go 13 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block. You only have 3 choices.
Well, I that would have to be, I'm going to go with Long Beach State.
Incorrect. It was.
Oh, so then it's Vanderbilt.
It is Vanderbilt. All right, let's go 19 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. You shot 88% from the field.
Well, that's the one. I know that game, and that's because I grabbed Kejuan Garris and I chewed his ass out to pass me the ball because I was killing Othella Harrington. That they had to start double teaming me, and I was like, dude, give me the fucking ball.
Georgetown's correct. Yes, and Long Beach State, you actually, the win you got in the NCAA tournament, that's the one you had the most points in, 20 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 75% from the field, 8 for 11 from the line, I believe, in the first round in the 92-93 season. So pretty good. I'll give you a 2 for 3. That's solid. That's passing. So
there you go.
More of the weekly recaps is not necessarily just going to be about you, but it's going to be about Illinois basketball history. I know you got the Matthew Meyer question right. Well, Deon, of course, Illinois. When you think of Illinois and you think of the years through, you're one of the names that comes up. So we got to see if you know your stuff, right?
You gonna test my basketball, my Illinois basketball knowledge? Dane, I'm with it. Bring it on, baby. Bring it on. I can tell you that might be a little hard for me. I cared about wins and losses, but let's do it.
If you care about wins and losses. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say now, there was a window when I was living in Europe and I didn't get all of the Illinois games. So if I flub some answers there, then you got to be it. For 14 years I was over there. So if I flub a few answers, don't be looking at me side eye, right?
No, but now since you say it's about wins and losses, then maybe that is going to be sort of when we do another weekly recap, that might be my next sort of subject of the question. I might say a game in your career and describe like some of the, say a game, describe some of the players that played in that game, and you have to tell me whether they won or lost. I'll do that next time.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Okay.
Right. I'll name some players and the stat line of that game and sort of, I'm not going to tell you what year, obviously, because that'll give it away. Because of course you might have played 4 games against Michigan in your career. You have to name which one that was and whether you won or lost. So that I think that'll be fun though. That'll be good.
Oh, I agree. I think it's going to be great. I definitely want to do it. I think it'll be fun. And then I can see how much I have forgotten or how much I remember. So I'm all in. Let's do it.
Well, Deon, I think you've forgotten more basketball than I'll ever know. I think you've forgotten more basketball than most people will know. I mean, coach, you played overseas for forever. So, but excited to get back for another weekly recap. Illinois, Wisconsin coming up soon. And then, of course, some tough games down the stretch. You mentioned Rutgers, Purdue, but I know we're both excited to see how this team does, especially with the potential that they have. Second weekend team, are you still feeling that?
I do. I do. I think this team has the ability, as I said, to make a long run. We need a little bit more from Coleman, and he has a lot more to give. I mean, he's one of the most talented players in college sports, and that's why the NBA is so intrigued by what he does. So I just want to see him step it up another notch because he has it in him. And if he can do that and get a consistent 3-man, 3 go-to guys, and then you have Jaden Epps, who's going to be Jaden Epps. I mean, he was a big-time scorer in high school. He can score the basketball. And then you have Dane on the inside. I mean, that's what makes this team so dangerous. And you're right. There's not going to be a lot of people that want them in their bracket or want to play them.
Mm-hmm. Well, Deon, Champaign on Ice weekly recap number 2, Illinois going down the stretch. It's almost February. We got to get excited.
I know.
It's almost February. I mean, it gets late early. I've been saying that all year. It gets late early. Well, definitely excited for the rest of the stretch for the Fighting Illini. For Deon, I'm Dane Richardson, producer for Champaign on Ice. Make sure you stay tuned to content on Field of 68 for the rest of the college basketball season. Thank you to our sponsor, BetRivers. Make sure you like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure you subscribe to the playlist Champaign on Ice on Field of 68's YouTube. All of that for Deon. I'm Dane. This has been Champaign on Ice.